The smell of burning came from the ventilation system, as if someone had been drying their hair with a hairdryer and forgotten to turn it off at night. The girl looked up. The light in the hallway flashed once, then twice, and went out. Only the narrow beam from her phone remained. At that moment, a quiet sound came from behind the wall, exactly like her own breath. She had been driving on the highway for 5 hours and chose this hotel not because it was good, but because it was the first one with a sign saying, "Rooms available." A one-story building by the roadside, plastic windows, a reception desk behind glass, a tired administrator in a gray sweater. She asked for a room for one night, just to sleep and move on in the morning. She had a suitcase, a laptop, and a stack of papers in an envelope, documents for a new job. The move was spontaneous, almost forced. She was leaving the city where everything reminded her of failure. No one here knew her name, and that seemed almost like a relief. The room was at the end of a long corridor, number 86. The numbers were unevenly glued on, the last one slightly peeling off. Inside, it was the usual gray: a narrow bed, a wardrobe, a mirror, a curtain, the smell of cleaning products. On the nightstand was a folder with the rules, but for some reason the pages started with .2. She didn't think much of it. The first thing that alarmed her was a quiet echo. When she put her bag on the bed, something thudded behind the wall, as if another suitcase had hit the same spot. When she went to wash up, water splashed in the sink in the bathroom, and a strange echo came from the pipe, as if someone had repeated the same movement in the next room. But there were no neighbors. Through the thin walls, you could usually hear televisions and footsteps, but here, only the echoes of her own actions. She decided she was tired. She closed her laptop, turned off the light, and went to bed. Before falling asleep, she remembered seeing a cleaning lady in the hallway, an old woman with a bucket and a rag. She said something like, "This end isn't listed," but her words were drowned out by the hissing of the vacuum cleaner. The girl didn't understand what she meant at the time. She woke up from the cold. The morning was gray and dull, and for some reason, the door wouldn't open. The card beeped, but the lock didn't click. At first, she thought it was stuck, so she tried harder. Silence. Then she tried to call the front desk. There was no signal. The phone showed 0 signal. Only the camera connection indicator flashed on the screen. She went to the window. The glass was frosted. She couldn't see anything. It was as if there was concrete behind it. She tried to move the curtain. The fabric caught on a nail that had apparently held something else before. An old business card lay on the windowsill, the administrator's name and phone number. When she dialed it, she heard a dial tone behind the wall. Then she pressed her ear against the wall and heard someone standing opposite her, breathing at the same rhythm as her. She took a step. There was a step too. She touched the wall. There was a quiet creak in response. And she could have chalked it all up to her nerves if it weren't for the faint scent of perfume, exactly the same as the one she used herself. She tried to calm down and think logically. Maybe it was a double room. Maybe they had mixed up the layout. She took a sheet of rules from the folder and noticed in small print at the bottom, "Please check the cleaning schedule upon check-in." There were numbers next to it, but 86 was not among them. The list ended at 85, then went to 87. She sat down on the bed, opened her laptop, and decided to write a message to the hotel's email. But the connection failed. Then she opened her notes and wrote down everything she remembered. The smell, the echo, the mirror, the strange room number. For a second, she thought she saw someone standing behind her in the reflection. But when she turned around, there was no one there. To distract herself, she decided to tidy up. She folded her clothes, wiped the mirror, and straightened the bedspread. Something glinted under the bed. A small token, similar to a hotel key, only with the number 86 stamped on it, and the name erased. On the back there was a trace of glue, as if the token had once been glued to the door. There was a quiet knock at the door. She started, asked who was there, but of course no one answered. There was another knock, a little louder, then a short sound, as if someone had run their fingernail across metal. She went over and looked through the peephole. Darkness. She decided it was probably the cleaning lady and went to the mirror to tidy herself up. And she saw another suitcase reflected on the bed. She blinked. The suitcase was in the same place, but the lid was slightly open. She remembered clearly that she had locked it. She went over and checked. Everything was in place, but the smell of someone else's perfume had grown stronger. She sat down on a chair and tried to remember when exactly she had checked in. At the front desk, they didn't give her a receipt, just waved their hand and said, "Everything has already been paid for." She thought that maybe they had mixed up her reservation with someone else's, but now it seemed like it wasn't an accident, but a scheme. She opened the folder again. Between the pages was a piece of paper torn from an old registration log. It had been handwritten, "6th, do not issue." No name, no signature, just the date, 3 years ago. Her fear became concrete. Not mystical, but practical. If the number really wasn't listed, then it wasn't being checked, removed, or taken into account. That meant anyone could be put here and no one would know. She went to the door and started kicking it, but the lock wouldn't budge. Then she turned to the mirror and saw for the first time that the reflection was half a second behind. The girl froze. She took a step back. Her reflection repeated the movement, but slightly slower, as if it lived in its own time. And then she noticed that her reflection had a stain on its sleeve that she didn't have. She remembered that when she checked in, the administrator didn't look at her passport or reservation, just handed her a key card and said, "The room is quiet, no neighbors." At the time, it seemed polite. Now it seemed deliberate. She tried calling again, this time with a video call. The administrator's face appeared on the screen, but the video cut out instantly, and the image froze. The reception desk behind which he was standing, and next to him, a woman with a suitcase, just like hers. The girl felt as if the room had become smaller. The air grew thick. There was a slight tapping sound coming from the ceiling, like footsteps. She remembered the cleaning lady's words, "This end isn't listed," and realized that she wasn't talking about the hallway, but about this part of the building. that perhaps there was simply no record of it here, no electricity, no communications, no guest log. She looked at the mirror, and now the reflection was sitting on the bed. Same posture, same clothes, but looking her straight in the eye. Around her neck was a thin chain with a pendant, just like the one she had lost a week ago in her old apartment. Her hands trembled. She took a step toward the mirror, and the reflection did not move. At one point, it seemed as if the reflection smiled, barely noticeable, as if waiting. She stepped back, sat down on the floor, and tried to remember where she might have seen this hotel before. And then she remembered. In the rental ads, under the post for a room for one, the address was the same. Only there was a photo of another girl, similar to her, but with a different last name. The comments under the post disappeared a day later. She went back to the mirror and quietly ran her fingers over the surface. The cold glass trembled. In the reflection, her hand remained in place, but not hers. And at that moment, she heard someone moving a chair behind the wall. She stood listening to every sound. Whoever was behind the wall moved cautiously, as if deliberately in sync. The floorboard creaked softly. In response, the same movement under her feet. She suddenly realized that if she knocked on the wall, the knock would not return as an echo, but as a response. And she checked. 3 short knocks. A second of silence. Then 3 more of the same. There was no fear or panic inside her, only cold, slow clarity. She took the token, put it in her pocket, and took a screwdriver out of her suitcase, left over from her last job. The screws on the door panel, where the lock was located, were not painted over. She tried to unscrew one. The metal shifted, and something like a thin cable flashed in the gap. A faint hum came from inside, as if the room had its own power supply. As she worked, the creaking behind the wall grew louder. Someone was moving furniture, or rather, she herself, but not her. Her every breath echoed there. She turned off the light and immediately noticed that the mirror was glowing more dimly than it should have. A strip of light was coming from under the frame, as if there was another room behind the glass. She remembered that there was an evacuation plan hanging at the reception desk. And in it, if she remembered correctly, the corridor ended at room 85. After that was the exit. And behind the exit was a utility room. That meant her room shouldn't physically exist. She went to the outlet, unplugged the charger, and noticed that the outlet was warm, as if there were not a wire behind the wall, but something alive. Then she decided to record everything on her laptop camera. She turned on the recording and began to speak calmly, without panic, so that there would be evidence. She described the room, the mirror, the lack of internet, the strange smell, the token, and the cleaning lady's words. But when she looked at the screen, there was a different background. Her voice was coming from a room with white walls and a glass of water on the bed. She turned around. In reality, there was no glass. In the video, someone was standing behind her. She turned off the recording, but the frame remained frozen on the screen. The face behind her was not fully visible, only a shoulder and the edge of a suitcase, the same one as hers. Her fingers trembled, but she knew she had to get out at any cost. She decided to try the window. The glass wouldn't budge. Then she pried open the seam with a knife from the breakfast set, and a piece of the panel broke off, revealing a narrow gap between the walls. There was a narrow corridor, as if between double walls. In the distance, she could see wires, chalk marks, and an old sign that read, "Service Access." She crawled through the opening and felt the musty air. Her footsteps echoed hollowly on the concrete floor. Along the wall stood old doors, without handles, all identical. One had the number 85, another 70. Between them was an empty space where there had probably once been another door. At that moment, there was a thud behind her. The door to her room had closed. The light from her laptop remained inside. In the darkness, she heard quiet breathing, but it wasn't hers. She felt her way along the wall and walked toward the light. A dim lamp flickered at the end of the corridor. Behind it was a metal staircase leading down. She descended, counting her steps so as not to get lost. At the bottom was a narrow hall, similar to a basement. On the walls were lists of shifts, neatly pinned up with buttons. She moved closer. The last entry on the list of dates read, "Cleaning, 86th, cancel. Signed, A.L." Her gaze lingered on the initials. They matched the first letters of her first and last name. Then she realized that the mirror was not reflecting the past or another, but the previous guest, the one with the same initials, perhaps due to a booking error, or perhaps because the hotel system simply did not delete old data. The room was like a repository of records, not electronic ones, but human ones. She opened the closet against the wall. Inside were folders with registration logs. And indeed, room 86 appeared 3 times in different years, but all the entries were crossed out. The last one had no date. The payment column said cash. The room condition column said do not service. A dull sound came from the corner of the basement, as if a metal object had fallen. She turned her head and saw a token like hers rolling across the floor, only with a different number, 86, crossed out with a knife. She picked it up and saw an old rotary dial telephone nearby. There was a layer of dust on the body, but the indicator was flashing. She picked up the receiver. Silence. Then a short rustle, and a voice. Her own. The voice uttered the phrase she had just recorded on video. She froze, clutching the phone, until she heard a light tapping from the speaker. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The sound was not random. It was Morse code. SOS. She realized that it wasn't her, but someone before her who had been trying to make contact, and that the signal had been repeating cyclically all this time, stuck in the old wiring. Perhaps that was why the sockets were warm. The girl hung up the phone, and at that moment, the basement door quietly opened. The administrator was standing in the doorway. He looked tired, but calm. He asked if she was lost. He said that the exit was on the other side, and he suggested that she Go back upstairs to take care of everything." His voice was steady, like that of a person who knows that he is in control of the situation. She followed him, but noticed that he was holding key number 85, not 86. She asked him what number he had given her when she checked in. He replied that it was 85. She stopped. She said that the number 86 was on the door. He frowned and said that there was no such room and never had been. And then she took out her badge. The administrator took it, looked at it for a long time, then put it on the table and said that they don't make those anymore. And he added, as if apologizing, "The building is old. Sometimes duplicates happen." He offered to call her a taxi. She agreed, just to get out. When they approached the exit, a woman's cough was heard from the corridor, muffled, as if from afar. The administrator froze. He said it might be the wind, but the wind doesn't cough. The street was quiet. She turned to the windows. All of them were dark, except for one on the second floor, where a dim light was burning. The curtains were drawn, but a shadow was moving behind them. Human, but slightly uneven, like a reflection through water. The taxi pulled up. The driver said he had never seen such hotels here before. The old sign on the facade was warped. The letters were worn away, and the name now read like a set of fragments. She left without looking back. But when she opened her suitcase in the new city, there was another token at the bottom, clean, without a number, as if waiting for her. In the new city, she rented a small room in a private house. White walls, wooden floors, the smell of fresh paint, nothing like that motel. She tried not to think about what had happened. She got a job, threw away her travel clothes, and bought a new phone. But the feeling that something was following her did not go away. At night, she heard a light tapping on the wall, as if someone was trying to match the rhythm of her breathing. Sometimes the sound came from the electrical outlet. Sometimes from behind the mirror. She tried turning on music to drown it out, but the tapping adjusted to the melody. A few days after moving in, she received a letter with no return address. Inside was a key, a hotel key, metal, engraved with the number 86. She didn't tell anyone about the number. She just recorded everything in that video, which later disappeared from her laptop. At first, she thought someone had found her things and decided to return them. But a tag with her new address was glued to the key ring. That meant someone already knew where she lived. She took the letter to the post office. The employee said that the envelope had no stamp, as if it had simply been placed in the box by hand. Then the girl decided to check the recording from the surveillance camera hanging above the entrance. A neighbor, a former technician, helped her retrieve the archive. The footage shows a man in a dark coat approaching the door at night, standing there for a long time, then simply disappearing from the frame without taking a step. The camera did not turn off, but at the moment when he was supposed to leave, the image jerked, and then there was nothing. She began to search for information about this hotel. Through old forums, booking archives, reviews, nothing. But one travel website mentioned a similar address, only under a different name, with a photo showing a door with the number 86 in the background and a caption that read, "Closed after the incident." No details. She wrote to the owner of the page. The reply came a day later. Short. "If you found the key, don't come back. It's not a number, it's a record." She didn't understand what recording meant. She tried to contact them again, but the page had already been deleted. Everything was going as usual at work. She quickly got to grips with her duties and tried not to stand out. Her co-workers said she looked tired, but she blamed it on the move. Only one woman in the department, an elderly accountant, said once, "You've been through this before, haven't you?" She added that she remembered her face, but couldn't remember where from. This made her suspicious. She had never met her before. She decided to look at the old documents from the motel that evening. From the basement, she had taken a copy of a page from the logbook marked "Do Not Disclose." She took it out of the folder, opened it, and saw that the back now had new text printed on it, as if someone had typed over it. "Registration restored." The signature was A.L., her initials. From that moment on, little things began to appear that reminded her of that room. The water in the bathroom flowed with the same sound as before. The light flashed with the same rhythm. In the mirror, for a moment, she saw the old tiles that had never been in her apartment. One night, the doorbell rang. She opened the peephole. No one was there. But there was a business card on the doormat. It was the same one that had been on the motel windowsill, with the administrator's phone number. She didn't call, she just tore it up and threw it away. The next day, her downstairs neighbor complained about the noise. It sounded like someone was walking around in her apartment at night. But she didn't get up. She didn't hear any footsteps. Just a knock. 3 times. Steady, as if measured by a metronome. Then she decided to make a recording. She set the tape recorder on the nightstand and left it on. In the morning, she listened to it. There was no sound of her breathing or sleeping on the recording. Only a rustle and a voice, quiet, barely audible, repeating, "6th, 6th." She turned the recorder on again and recorded her explanation so she could check it later. "I'm in another room, in another city." Then she turned it off. But a minute later, the device turned itself on, and the speaker emitted the same words she had spoken. But the voice sounded slightly older, rougher, as if it weren't hers. She decided to take the device to a colleague in the IT department who knew about sound. He said that the voice did indeed sound like hers, but it had not been recorded by the microphone, but seemed to have been taken from another tape, superimposed on the old layer, like an old echo that is reproduced with each new recording. He advised her to just throw the recorder away. She agreed, but didn't do it. Something was holding her back, as if it were her only connection to what had really happened. That evening, she went to the supermarket. At the checkout, she saw a billboard advertising hotels. Among the random banners, a line flashed. "Hotel on the highway. Comfort, quiet, room 86 is available." The screen flashed, and the inscription disappeared. She returned home and discovered that a tag had reappeared on her suitcase, old and dusty. It wasn't her handwriting, but the letters were familiar. A.L. The date was tomorrow. She stared at the suitcase for a long time. Then she took a knife and cut open the fabric under the handle. Inside was a narrow seam, sewn with white thread. When she unraveled it, a folded sheet of paper fell out. Old, yellowed, with the hotel's stamp on it. It read, "Guest has left. Body not found." From that moment on, she stopped sleeping. She spent the next night at the window, watching the street. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when the lights were dimmer, a man with a suitcase walked down the road. Slowly, steadily. The suitcase was the same as hers. He stopped under her window and looked up. She closed the curtains, but a second later, she heard a knock. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The same SOS signal. She turned on her laptop and decided to check the old recording, the one she had made at the motel. The file now had a different name, New Registration. When she opened it, she saw that same room. She was sitting on the bed. Only her gaze was directed straight at the camera, as if it were no longer a recording, but a live connection. The screen dimmed, and for a moment, the reflection became a mirror. A word appeared on its surface, drawn by condensation. Return. She realized that this was not just a repetition, it was a cycle. That number 86 was not a room, but a place where those who remained in between, at the moment of moving, between the old and the new, between leaving and not returning, ended up. And each new victim became the previous one for the next. Now she knew what she had to do: find the person who would move in after her. She stopped leaving the house, but outwardly everything looked as if she was living normally, answering calls, receiving parcels, shopping online. She needed time. She was waiting for the next step. Who would take the key after her? She knew that number 86 had not disappeared. It was just waiting for a new name in its line. On the third night after that entry, an email arrived with the subject line, "Reservation confirmation." It contained her name, tomorrow's date, and the address. The same motel on the highway. The amount was $0, the payment method was cash, and the administrator's comment was, "Welcome, A.L." It was a choice. Delete the email or go. She understood that if she didn't go, the number would find her anyway. That perhaps only the one who closed the cycle could stop it from repeating. And so she decided to return. The road was empty. There was fog all around, with only a few lights visible. The motel stood in the same place, as if no one had touched its walls all this time. The sign was the same, but the letters had turned black. There was a lock on the door, but the gate led to the back entrance. She went in without turning on the light. The hallway seemed shorter than before. The air was still, smelling of dust and cheap soap. On the front desk was the same logbook. On top of the old entries, one word was now printed: restored. She picked up a pen and wrote a line underneath it. A.L. withdrawn. There was a quiet crack behind the wall. She walked down the hallway where her room used to be. Now there was no sign, only a trace of glue and a rectangle of slightly lighter paint. She put her palm on it, and a chill ran through her skin, as if there was still a door under the layer of paint. She pressed harder and felt a soft resistance under her fingers, like an old lock. The wall shook slightly. She pushed with her shoulder, and the panel gave way, opening a narrow passage. Behind it was the same room. It was intact, as if no one had closed it. On the bed was a suitcase. Hers. She entered, feeling the air become denser. She sat down on the bed and opened the suitcase. Inside were clothes, the ones she had thrown away in the new city. At the very bottom was a token. A new one. It had the number 87 on it. She understood. The number changes the order. Everyone who returns leaves room for the next one. Something moved in the mirror. Now the reflection did not repeat her movements. It moved slightly faster, as if in a hurry to finish. Its face showed fatigue, but no fear. The hand in the reflection held a pen and wrote something on a piece of paper. She leaned closer and read, "If you are reading this, do not be afraid. Just sign." There was indeed a form on the nightstand, the very same registration form. The signature line was blank. She picked up the pen, but did not sign right away. At that moment, the door opened. A young girl stood in the doorway, holding a suitcase and wearing a dusty jacket. She looked confused, as if it were her first time there. She asked if she could stay for one night. The administrator stood behind her, in the shadows. His voice was as calm as ever. He said that only one room was available, and he handed her the key with the number 86 on it. She realized that this was her moment, that this was her new entry. If the girl entered, the cycle would continue. If she didn't enter, the place would disappear. But she herself, the one standing there now, would dissolve along with it. She approached the girl and said that the room was occupied and that it would be better to leave. The girl hesitated. Then the administrator intervened and said that there were no other options. And then something happened that she did not expect. The cleaning lady, the same one who had once said, "This end does not count," came out from behind the counter. The old woman looked the same, only now with a straight back and a clear gaze. She said that everything will be closed now, and took the key from the administrator's hand. He didn't have time to say anything. He just lowered his head. The old woman turned to the girl and quietly told her to go to the car. The young woman obeyed and left. When the door closed behind her, the air in the corridor became lighter. The light from the lamps suddenly became steady, without flickering. The mirror at the end of the corridor darkened, as if something had dissolved inside it. The administrator took off his glasses and stared at the cleaning lady for a long time. He asked who she was. She replied simply, "The one who cleans up the records." Then she turned to the heroine and said that she could leave now, that her number was closed. She looked at the token. The numbers had disappeared. Smooth metal, no traces. Stepping outside, she breathed in the air, which seemed real for the first time. Behind her, the motel looked like an ordinary dead building with no lights on. The sign was no longer on the facade. She walked toward the highway without looking back. A few weeks later, she was living in another city, peacefully. No letters, no knocks, no mirrors where her reflection lingered. But one day, While putting away documents in a desk, she found a folder she didn't remember. Inside was a blank sheet of paper with a line at the bottom. Number 87. Do not disclose. She closed the folder and put it away in the drawer. And for the first time in a long time, she felt she could smile. Because she knew that now the cycle depended on her. And if she didn't open the door, no one would come in.